Shalom and welcome to the One Pasuk podcast, in which three rabbis from Englewood, New Jersey, each share an insight on one particular pasuk from the Parsha, and reflect on each other's ideas. Rabbinic banter, I like to call it. I am Rabbi Chaim Pupko of Congregation Avat Torah, and I'm joined by my dear friends and colleagues,
Rabbi Akiva Block, Kilat Kesher,
and Rabbi Daniel Goldberg, Eitz Chaim, the Englewood Stiebel.
To sponsor an episode of the One Pasuk podcast, visit onepasukpodcast.com and click on the sponsorship link. And please take a moment and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast platform. Our one pasuk for this week's Parsha, Parshas Shelach, comes from the end of a Parsha, a very small but well-known anecdote, tucked in between a few different topics. Perek Tezvav, pasuk Lamed Beis, chapter 15, verse 32, Vihyuo b'nei Israel במדבר, when Bnei Israel were in the desert, וימצאו ish, they found a man, מקשש עצים, gathering pieces of wood, ביום השבת, on the Shabbos day. And we know what happens to him. He is punished. He is put to death after inquiring what to do with him. This is one of those very short anecdotes that are quite powerful. They stick out a little bit because they're so brief and enigmatic, and I'm so curious what you guys have to say about it.
So there's obviously, like you said, Rabbi Pupko, a lot to talk about in this episode. Chazal wonder exactly what the Makoshesh Eitzim's sin was. It's not clear what the word Makoshesh even means. There are three opinions in the Gemara and Shabbos as to exactly what he did wrong. What was the malacha? Was it ma'amer? Was it tolesh? Ma'avir dalet amos b'shus rabba? Maybe he was carrying in the public domain. All sorts of different opinions. And I think what that dispute reflects is that the specific mistake of the Makoshesh is less important than something else that the pasuk seems to emphasize. Rav Hirsch has a brilliant and astute comment on this pasuk, and that is the subject of the pasuk is not really the Makoshesh. He notes that it could have said, Vayhi b'midbar vayikoshesh ish mibnei Israel עצים, or something like that. But the focus here is clearly on Bnei Israel. Vihyuo b'nei Israel b'midbar וימצאו ish mikoshesh עצים. The focus here is not on the fact that someone did mikoshesh עצים. The focus is on Klal Yisrael and their A, being in the midbar, and B, finding and ultimately apprehending and prosecuting and punishing the individual who was Makoshesh Eitzim. And Rav Hirsch puts the two parts of the Psukim together and the fact that the focus is on Bnei Israel to offer the following beautiful insight. He says that it doesn't seem to be relevant, Vihyuo b'nei Israel b'midbar. It doesn't seem to be relevant where they are. And he says that Vihyuo b'nei Israel b'midbar is actually meant to link this particular episode with the aftermath of the Chet HaMeraglim, which comes earlier in the Parsha. Bnei Yisrael were in the Midbar. They were now ensconced in, they were knee-deep in their desert wandering aimlessly. They were just going nowhere for a period of 40 years. And they would have every reason to shed the yoke of Torah and mitzvos, to not be as committed in their observance of halacha, whether for themselves or enforcing the observance of halacha amongst others. And what Rav Hirsch explains is the Torah here is very specific, very particular in noting Am Yisrael were in the Midbar, they were wandering throughout the desert, Vayimtzu, and still they committed themselves to standing up for Torah, to defending Hashem and the mitzvot, and actually ensuring the meticulous observance of Shabbos, in specific here, but of halacha in general, and being willing and able to bring to justice those who are non-compliant. That's a really important lesson for us, because so much of our observance of halacha, our commitment to Torah and mitzvos, comes from a sense of mission and purpose. We're going somewhere. We're not wandering aimlessly. There's a purpose to what we're doing. There's a goal in mind where it's aspirational. We actually want to get to a particular place. We believe that mitzvos can do for us something, and so we do them. And what the Torah teaches us here is that even when that goal, that mission, that aspiration isn't as palpably felt, even when we're feeling like we're wandering aimlessly, literally or figuratively, the very same commitment and dedication and devotion to the fulfillment of mitzvos and the care and concern that we have that others do the same should be there. Even when we're in the proverbial midbar and it doesn't seem like we're actually going anywhere. Viמצאו ish מקשש עצים, Am Yisrael thought and consider the fact that Shabbos needs to be observed, kosher needs to be observed, halacha needs to be observed, all the things that make up a Jewish community need to be observed in order to preserve the integrity of that community, even when the mission and the goal isn't as clear, even when there isn't that sense of clarity, we still need to be on guard for the Viמצאו to actually look around us and ensure that the integrity of the community is preserved to the extent we can.
That beautiful idea is what Viktor Frankl came to in the camps, that he found that those who were able to survive, to demonstrate resilience, were those who felt that they still had meaning and purpose in their lives. And he argued with logotherapy that the primary human drive isn't for pleasure or for power, but rather is for having meaning and a sense of purpose. And what I love about this also is that, and I make this observation often, which is one of the things I love about Torah is how honest it is. Here you have this very important idea that's conveyed in a very tragic way. I could see a human author of a biblical text like this trying to paint the most inspirational story of how to demonstrate this sense of meaning. But no, the Torah is able to convey it in very stark terms, where there was a person who was violating the Torah, and Bnei Israel, despite their wandering and despite the seemingly pointlessness of their lives, knowing they would die out in the desert, are still able to maintain a sense of purpose and mission, even in a terribly tragic situation.
So I actually love how you, maybe ever so subtly and subconsciously, corrected or improved what I was saying, because I think you're correct.
I hope I didn't change what you were saying.
Well, you did, but I think for the better. What I was saying is there needs to be a non-negotiable commitment to halacha, irrespective of mission and purpose. And I think what you're saying, which is actually, I'm not sure, I have to go back and see which of these two things Rav Hirsch was commenting. Maybe he wasn't commenting. Maybe Rav Hirsch wasn't commenting on either of these things, and I'm just making it up. But that actually the nation was able to find purpose in their observance of halacha, even if, like Viktor Frankl and those who are in the camps, even if that mission and purpose isn't overt, one can still create within themselves a sense of direction. And we're going somewhere, and we're going to be something, and create a search, to use Viktor Frankl, that there's a constant search for meaning, and you can find meaning in the things that you do, even if it appears as though you're wandering aimlessly, even if you're a prisoner of war, even if you're a prisoner in the camps, nonetheless, you can still find that meaning. So it's not just a non-negotiable commitment to halacha, but actually that we are in the business of meaning making, even if we can't actually find that in such an easy way.
So that's what I thought you were saying, which is what I was going off on. Like, I thought you were saying that even though they didn't have that sense of mission and destiny in terms of, going to the land of Israel, where they were going, they were still able to find purpose and meaning in their present situation in terms of upholding the Torah.
Right.
Another way to read this, which kind of turns it on its head, would be in as much as the pasuk puts Bnei Israel in the driver's seat. So it's saying, "Vayhi Bnei Israel b'midbar," that as a result of the sin of the Meraglim, so the Jewish people were in the midbar. And because of that, because they lost that drive and that sense of purpose, and they were unable to take that leap and move and drive history forward, so then וימצאו ish מקשש עצים ביום השבת, so that creates the environment where someone's going to be מקשש עצים, meaning when you lose the drive, right? It's 180 degrees from what you're saying, but I think it's in terms of it's actually placing blame on Bnei Israel in a certain sense, because as a result of the Meraglim, this is the byproduct. If you're not advancing, you're giving yourself too much opportunity to fall, right? It's the opposite. And then you could say, well, and then Bnei Israel respond admirably, meaning you can put these two things together, that this was only one person. And so it could be both blaming Bnei Israel for the episode, in a sense, in the larger sense, but then also lauding Bnei Israel for their response to it. I'm adding another layer here.
And there's good textual evidence for that, because it is in the course of these parshios in Shelach and Korach where we see Am Yisrael completely throwing up their hands after Korach, when they say we're going nowhere. Sorry. Vayomru b'nei Israel el Moshe lemor hein gavanu avadnu kulanu avadnu, where they actually say in the immediate aftermath of the Maisa of Korach, and they say we're all going to die.
Yeah.
We're lost.
Yes, and
There's nothing.
those are actually the last words that we hear from the Dor Yotzei Mitzrayim, from the generation that leaves Egypt. The beginning of Chukas is basically
the next generation.
You're right, and those Chukas Torah is like a screensaver for a moment as the entire generation dies, and then and that's talking, of course, about what you do when you confront death, right? When you become Tamei Lameis, and then you have the new generation. So yeah, those are the last words that we hear from this generation.
And it's a beautiful foreshadow here that Vayyu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar, that actually defeatist attitude is precisely what breeds, what cultivates someone who's going to be Makosha. I think Rav Hirsch's insight about the focus of the pasuk being on Am Yisrael and their response still holds, but
yes,
it is certainly...
It has layers of complexity that are, in a certain sense, in conflict with each other. But I think that's just part of the beauty of the Torah. In such an economy of words, you can pack so much meaning. But if we went with this idea and just brought it out a little further, so it's the Bnei Israel basically had this very scary next chapter to take in their lives and the unfolding of Jewish history. And there are obviously so many different ways to read the story of the Meraglim, but if we understand it as basically primarily driven by a sense of fear to go and take that next step and take that leap. So they said, we want to stay where we are. And the problem is that if you're not advancing in your own life and in Jewish history, that if you're just trying to walk backwards on the escalator, inevitably it creates the environment for failure and for sin and for these things to happen. And so Bnei Israel didn't advance, and thus they were in the midbar, and thus these things start to happen. You have to take it. I want to say it in an encouraging way. You should take that leap, take the next step, enter into the next phase, because with all the unknowns, it's always going to be better than stalling in the place that you are.
It reminds me of that great quote from The Shawshank Redemption.
Get busy living, get busy dying?
Exactly. Okay. Get busy living or get busy dying.
To just dovetail with that idea is the fact that, on the one hand, so we just put together two diametrically opposed ways of reading this pasuk in terms of the message that you take from it, although I think they can be synthesized and both read into the pasuk. And I think that in the kind of vague haze of this story and as I said, the economy of words, there's so little here to draw on. We also find among the Mefarshim just dramatically different explanations for what drives the Mikoshesh. On the one hand, Rabbi Bechai says they were in the midbar, they had absolutely everything. They had man. Why would he be Mechal Shabbos? It amplifies the sin. And at the same time, there are midrashim that say that he did this l'shem shamayim, that the Jewish people were under the mistaken impression that now that they're going to be in the midbar, not going to the land, maybe Shabbos didn't apply anymore to them. And so he went, and it was a kind of suicide mission to show them that no, Shabbos is still in effect. I'm going to be Mechal Shabbos, and you'll see what's going to happen to me, which is, of course, both incredibly extreme and maybe something that we would have a complicated relationship with as something that we would hold up as optimal. But there is certainly a great sense of piety that would be animating him. This would be an extraordinarily zealous for God and for the Jewish people type of individual. So my point is, I guess, a kind of meta point, which is that the text is so rich and you can pull out of the stories such diverse things. And if I wanted to go in the more Musar direction, you could also say that often when someone does one action, how we judge people is often very much a reflection of ourselves and what we want to see in that person. But the very same act could be interpreted by the great Mefarshim and Midrashim and Rishonim in such diametrically different ways.
It's almost like the Torah is, specifically with a story like this, inviting us to explore it more by giving us less information and less context, right? You look at like Aser Sadiros or Kriyas Yamsuf, and there's a lot there. Obviously, we can only understand so much, but there's so much there that there's a certain primary message that's very clear. But when it comes to Mikoshesh Eitzim, I think in this instance, it's like the Torah's inviting us to see all the different layers.
Yeah, it's precisely like that conversation between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira in the Gemara about the Mikoshesh, right? Rabbi Akiva says, Mikoshesh zut slavchad.
Yeah.
And Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira responds, you're being motzi laz on him.
Yeah.
Either the Torah didn't want us to know that, either you're right and the Torah didn't want us to know that and you're revealing it, or you're wrong, in which case... Yeah. So what's Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira's problem? Chazal do that all the time. They take an individual who's unnamed in the Torah and they give him a name.
Yes.
So why does he care? But the point is, maybe what Rabbi Pupko was saying is that this story is actually meant to be more mysterious and open to interpretation. And the more you give it a name, the less likely you are to be able to do that. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira is saying, stop stop explaining so much, stop revealing so much, let it sit, and let the text invite us to learn different things.
I think that's such an interesting, provocative idea. I think another dimension to it maybe is also Rabbi Yehuda then says he was one of the Ma'apilim, and that's a laudable thing. That was misguided zealousness for the land, which then, of course, interestingly manifests in the Benos Tzlafchad kind of carrying that mantle and wanting also the land, versus the Mikoshesh, which is, in his opinion, completely indefensible and an entirely so he's taking the extremely bad vantage point on this pasuk and saying, don't bring the benos tzlafchad and tzlafchad's name into this because that's just totally reprehensible, indefensible, and beyond an irredeemable act.
And yet it's about this we say maybe he was l'shem shamayim.
And exactly, right? And afal pichein we say maybe the Medrash says he was l'shem shamayim. It calls him an ish, as opposed to the Makalel, who's just called Ben Mitris or Hamakalel. He's called an ish, which suggests that he was like a someone and with some nobility here. Yeah.
Yeah. So I also noticed that word Viמצאו, that it doesn't just say that he was gathering sticks, but he was found gathering sticks. And so I want to make a very straightforward observation, really, and that is that there could be a very straightforward lesson from this episode, and that is that what we do as individuals, what we do as the personal choices we make, have an impact on the world around us, on the people around us, on our community. And that the problem with the mikoshesh עצים isn't just that he violated Shabbos, it's that he was seen, he was found violating Shabbos.
Beautiful.
And that's very important in the context of the entire Bnei Yisrael for that generation. And anytime somebody does something that breaks from the community, you can't say it's batel barov. You can't say that it's just nullified by the majority. Oh, it's just one person. Because when one person steps out and does something different, it can have a profound impact. It can be viral. It's what we say about Amalek, right? Amalek cooling down the Bnei Yisrael opens them up to be vulnerable to other nations. And the context in which I want to apply this to is obviously not nearly as severe, but I've found over many years, having davened in many places, that talking during davening is viral. That if one person starts talking, it invites other people to then talk. And one of the things that I've been thinking about lately, and I actually showed this to a very distinguished member of our shul, is I came up with 10 ways to talk in shul. I titled it The Top 10 Ways to Talk in Shul Less Horribly, but he said that sounded too negative. And so maybe I want to call it The Top 10 Ways to Talk in Shul. And one of them, I'd love to go through all 10, trust me, but one of them is I find that when people are talking, standing up in shul, that more people see it and it has more of an impact. I can't say, okay, that person started talking because of this person, but you're more visible. You're broadcasting your talking, right? And lack of attention to the davening. And one thing I would want people to consider, if people just were mindful that they only talk sitting down in shul and not standing up, I think it would have a little bit less of an impact. I think it would be a little bit less viral. Obviously, again, there's a wide gap between the mikoshesh עצים and the person talking in shul, but this concept that what we do personally has an impact and can impact others, I think is very true. It's the pasuk says, Poretz geder yashchenu nachash, right? That somebody who breaches a boundary is doing something bad. And that's what it is, boundary crossing. Boundary crossing has an impact. It's one of the blessings and curses of living in such close-knit community. We derive so much power, so much strength, so much support, but it also means that when one person decides to do something, it has a greater impact.
My father always would tell me that when he was growing up, his father, when they saw someone on Shabbos who they knew was Jewish riding in the car, my grandfather would always tell my father, don't look, make pretend you don't notice. You don't want to embarrass the person. And now we'll be like, I'd be walking with my father down the street and a Jewish person would drive by and go, good Shabbos, Rabbi. So there definitely there's the appreciation and understanding that our behavior, even our individual behavior, the personal choices that we make has an impact on the community. I think in the closed environment of a shul, that's certainly the case, whether it's talking in the negative or it's positive davening and
Oh yes, thank you.
know,
Thank you for
singing
saying it in the
and
positive. Yeah.
singing and davening with kavana and concentrating intently on the Torah reading or whatever it is, going over to a guest to say hello and welcome them, all those things, all of that behavior is contagious and viral. So hopefully we can focus on the positive more than the negative.
Yeah.
Yeah, we say in Kedusha that the angels in God's heavenly court are nosnim rishus zel azel hakdish le'etzram menachas ruach. They give each other permission to sanctify God's name. And I like to always say it, I'll say, I don't know what it means that angels give each other permission, but I know that when one of us sees the other person getting into it, really letting themselves be in the moment, we give each other permission to also get into it.
Whatever it is, that's our
nosnim rishus.
We're supposed to nikadesh shemcha ba'olam kishem shmakdishim oso b'shmei marom.
Yes.
Kakosov v'karazal zevi amar kadosh kadosh kadosh. So it's actually we're supposed to mimic that behavior and actually sanctify Hashem. We don't use the language of Rishus in that Kedusha in terms of us, but we turn to each other and we sanctify Hashem. We engage in that behavior because we've been asked to, or because we see our neighbor doing the same. So it's the same exact points. All of the things that we do, even from a Ben Adam Lamakom perspective, is really in behavior that is meant to be inspired by and gleaned from those around us.
Yes. So there is a positive and negative contagion here. Your point's very well taken, Rabbi. For sure.
I love that idea. Beautiful.
10 terrific ways to talk during davening.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe over time we'll get to the other 9.
Beautiful.
All right.
Messiah.